Good morning. So it's Friday. So that means you're gonna have a vocab quiz today. So make sure you do your vocab, which a lot of you have, but some of you still haven't. Do your vocab, turn that in. Then do your vocab quiz. 10 questions. I think it's multiple choice. Nope. It is drop down. And then this 10 question quiz at the end of the notes today, and you are done for the weekend. So let's do the notes very quickly. We're going to go over sections 3 and 4 today. It won't take very long. They're pretty short. But yeah. So here is Nepal and Bhutan. Well, there's some facts about Nepal and Bhutan we're not going to watch. But if you look here, Nepal is the only flag in the world that's not a rectangle flag. It's two triangles symbolize mountain ranges and peace and prosperity and some other things. So it's a triangle flag. That's the flag of Nepal and Bhutan. So Nepal and Bhutan, if you drew like a Venn diagram, you know what a Venn diagram is? It's a circle with another circle and it overlaps a little bit in the middle. And how they're different is on the outside of the circles. How they're similar goes in the shared spot of the circle. Y'all should know what a Venn diagram is. But they share a lot of things in common. So there'd be a lot of stuff in the middle of this Nepal and Bhutan. Right here, Nepal, Bhutan. But there would be a lot of things that they share the same in the middle of this Venn diagram. Both are very isolated because of the mountains. Most of their territory is in the Himalayan mountains, with only just a little bit of the bottom part of it that would be lowlands that are kind of going into India valleys. But most of it is very mountainous. So they got very mountainous terrains there. They are very difficult to conquer. For a lot of their history, most of the time they have been just unconquered, and I think like Great Britain had kind of influence on them because they controlled India during that Raj period. But Nepal has never been conquered, and Bhutan was only conquered for a little bit during its history, like for less than 100 years. So very difficult to conquer because of those mountainous terrain. Nepal is mostly Hindu, while Bhutan is mostly Buddhist. Bhutan Buddhist. So Nepal is mostly Hindu in their religion. Bhutan is mostly Buddhist. Both are constitutional monarchies. Constitutional monarchy means they have kings. They've kings in which the rulers are limited by constitution, so they're not absolute monarchies. Their kings or queens have been passed down by hereditary, which means that they were born into it. That means that they're born into the king rulership. Both, I think, Bhutan is starting to transition into a democracy. No, sorry, Nepal is starting to transition into a democracy, but they're still a constitutional monarchy. Both are very poor and have limited national resources. The people there are very poor because they don't have a lot of natural resources because a lot of their terrain is mountainous. So can't have a lot of natural resources in the mountains. So uh, economy is based on agriculture, but that agriculture is very difficult because they're in mountains, so they have to do that kind of terrace farming. Their mountain land isn't very good for farming. The soil is not very good for farming. It's very difficult to do. Timber industry is important because mountains tend to have a lot of trees, but their deforestation is a problem in those regions because of they need the wood, so they cut it down real fast, and then deforestation happens. Tourism is a big industry that's growing, especially in Nepal. People want to go to Nepal to climb Mount Everest, and so there's a big tourist industry, like in Kathmandu, where they go into. That's where they kind of start your journey before you start going up the mountains. You start in Kathmandu. It's just a big tourist kind of area, and so there's a lot of tourism there. But both of them, for a long time, up until like the past 200 years, 150 years, you haven't even been able to visit these countries. They're both very isolated and didn't want to be visited, and they closed off from visitors. Um, so Nepal is still kind of strict in that. I mean, Bhutan is still kind of strict in that, but Nepal very much wants you to come in and climb their mountains for a lot of money. Speaking of mountain climbing, the people that lead you up mountains are the Sherpas. So if you're going to ever climb up Mount Everest, you're going to have to hire a Sherpa. That's because they are very known. They're very much known for their mountain climbing abilities, and they know the mountain like the back of their hand. They've climbed it a lot of times. So if you're going to hire, or if you're going to go up Mount Everest, you're going to have to hire a Sherpa. And you pay these guys, and they're people that have kind of lived in Nepal for a long, long time. The Bodhi people here are the people of Bhutan, and they also come from the Tibetan region. Kind of Tibet is the Chinese side of the Himalayas. Most live in these two-story houses. These Bodhi people live in the two-story houses. They have the livestock on the bottom floor, and the people live on the top floor. So your barn's kind of down here, your living area's up here. The guy who founded Buddhism was born kind of in Nepal in India. Siddhartha Gautama was born in the border of Nepal and India around the 6th century, and he came up with this religion of Buddhism. Bhutan is mostly Buddhist, but today Nepal is mostly, they transitioned to Hinduism like India is. So the founder of Buddha was born in Nepal, but yet Nepal is mostly Hindu, and Bhutan is the Buddhist people now. Buddhists use these things called mandalas. They're kind of geometric designs that aid in meditation. So you'll see this art all around around Bhutan. You'll see these kind of geometric shapes and art around Bhutan, and that's just kind of a Buddhist symbol of prosperity. Depending on, I mean, it helps meditation. Another one of those symbols that is more famous but has kind of been taken advantage of is the swastika, the German Nazi sign that we kind of all associate with Germany and Nazis. That is technically a mandala that you'll see if you go to a lot of Buddhist temples. You'll see that etched into the stone of these Buddhist temples, but it's not because they support the Nazis. The Nazis stole that sign from them. It means good luck and prosperity, and the Nazis stole that sign from them and used it as their own. And then there's some differences in Hinduism and Buddhism. You can watch that if you want. And then section 4. Section 4 is Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Remember Sri Lanka and the Maldives? On the bottom side of India, Sri Lanka is the big one island right here. It's kind of like a teardrop off the edge of India. Let's go back and see a map so you can see it. Sri Lanka is right here. The Maldives are about 1,200 little tiny islands that don't even show up a lot on a lot of your maps that are right around here on this side of India. So, Sri Lanka. The Sri Lanka, even today, has had its history is kind of by these two people, the Sinhalese and the Tamil people. The Sinhalese were the first people that went there. They were Buddhist people around the 6th century when Buddhism was really growing. The Buddhist people came from India and settled in the south side of Sri Lanka. So you can see here, majority of Sri Lanka people can trace their heritage back to the Sinhalese people. They created an advanced civilization. They have irrigation systems. They were a lot of them that live right down here. And remember this kind of mountainous, you can see here that's kind of mountainous terrain. But the Sinhalese are the majority people. Then you have the Tamil people. About 1,000 years later, when Hinduism was starting to spread, the Hindu people from southern India started coming into the northern part of Sri Lanka here. The Tamil people started coming in and living up here. And they wanted more and more land, so they started fighting the Sinhalese people to get back more territory for themselves. And so you had the civil war fighting in between these people. It ended around 2009 there, but there was fighting and civil war all throughout the 80s, 90s, 2000s. Even today, there's a little bit of fighting, but um, major civil war was throughout those 3 decades. Economics, how do they make their money in Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka is very good stuff or very good ground for fertile soil for plantation and growing things rice, rubber, coconuts, timber. Sri Lanka is one of the world leader in tea. You can see here, China is number one in tea, then India, then Kenya, and those are all massive size compared to what Sri Lanka's size is. Sri Lanka is pretty small, but it still produces tons and tons of tea. So they have a lot of the leader, or one of the world leaders in tea. They also have a lot of gemstones. These gemstones like your birthstones, rubies, amethyst, topaz, moonstone, all these other things. You might see your birthstone on here somewhere. There's a lot of those in Sri Lanka. And so Sri Lanka, a lot of the gemstones come from them. And then the Maldives. There's, like I said, about 1,200 or so islands, around 300,000 people. They are ruled by Muslims. So the Muslim sultans from the Middle East made their way over here, settled these islands, and ruled these areas. So majority of people in this region are Islamic background and Muslim background. They are presidential democracy. They have democracy. They vote on their leaders, but you're more than likely going to be have Islamic leaders in power. And then you have their main export is fish, obviously, because they're a bunch of small islands. But the big way they make their money is tourism, because they're a bunch of tiny little resort islands here. You can see here, these islands are just big enough to have resorts and stuff on them. So the way they make their money is tourism. So challenges today, uh, stuff and affects their tourism, which is how Sri Lanka and the Maldives make a lot of their money. Civil war in Sri Lanka, people didn't want to come to Sri Lanka if they're worried about dying in a civil war or driving and getting blown up, their car getting blown up because they run over a landmine. So civil war has made it to where a lot of people didn't want to visit there, and that affects their money. And then tsunamis and the sea level getting higher has caused like some of these Maldive islands that are very low-lying islands. Anyways, the rising sea levels taking away a lot of these islands, and so you have sea levels and tsunamis. Tsunamis are big waves caused by earthquakes, and the big waves come in. A big one happened right after Christmas in the early 2000s, and a lot of resort towns and people died because of this water rushing in, carrying away buses and houses and businesses. So it was in Sri Lanka. I think that's the last slide. Yeah, that's it. All right. So make sure you do this work, and after you're done, then you're done for the weekend. Have a good weekend.